Hi, friends. How you doing today? It's fantastic to be with you again. And welcome to Cartoon Researchers and Educators. And guess what? We have to have him. Oh, come on. We are going to be talking about one of my favorite movies, one of the best movies from Disney. We are going to be talking about Pinocchio. And of course, we need to have with us a very good friend of this podcast and a gentleman by the name of G.B. Kaufman. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Raquel. It's nice to be back.
Oh, fantastic. I mean, I have to say that it was interesting because the people that watched the first podcast about Snow White, all the comments that I got was, it's fantastic just to listen to GB. I said, well, thank you. Anyway, I want to share with all our viewers this amazing book called Pinocchio. Is how it was done, the movie. And it's a book that if you are interested in learning absolutely everything about the movie, this is the book that I will say should be for you mandatory to buy. Simply because it goes in all the details, in and outs, and all the little things. And of course, the author is our friend. So we're going to start talking about, because, we have like some ideas of what we want to talk, and we want to talk about many things. And David, what if we start talking, for example, about what was the story created? How was the story created by Collodi? Not by Disney. Let's start from the origin of the story.
Well, that's a good place to start because, we talked last month about Snow White, which is a traditional fairy tale that goes back to an oral tradition. And it started so many hundreds of years ago that nobody really knows exactly where it started. This is a different case. Pinocchio actually was a specific literary work by an author. We know who the author was, and it was published toward the end of the 19th century. So right from the beginning, there's a difference there. This actually was a novel that was extremely successful on its own long before the Disney studio came to it. So Collodi is a really interesting author when you start looking into his background. He did all kinds of writing. He was an extraordinarily prolific author, and he wrote novels, he wrote short stories, he wrote an opera, he wrote plays, he did literary criticism. He was all over the map. He was living in Italy. He was a passionate supporter of the Risorgimento when that took place, yes. And so a lot of his writing was political. So when he started writing this story in 1881, it was a serial in a children's periodical, and it was I think it was originally just called The Story of a Puppet, and he wrote this really interesting, quirky little tale of a puppet who at the end of the 15th chapter was overtaken by enemies and hanged. And he intended that to be the end of the story. But by that time, readers of this periodical were hooked on the story, and they demanded more chapters. So Collodi picked up again with chapter 16 and brought Pinocchio back to life again and wrote more adventures for him. And he did. He worked in it's. One of the interesting things about this, one interesting parallel between Collodi and Disney, is that Collodi wrote his book both for children and for adults. And of course, the Disney film is the same way. It's suitable for children, but it's an extraordinarily rich cinematic experience for an adult too. But he did. He worked in a lot of political symbolism and a lot of content that probably went over the heads of young readers, but were designed to appeal to adults. And he finally wound up with a 36-chapter work, and that was published in book form in 1883. And it immediately was a sensation, not only in Italy, but around the world. And Pinocchio became a really popular symbol worldwide and a subject of intense national pride in Italy. And it was translated into many languages. It was adapted for the stage. Other writers came up with unauthorized sequels to it. And inevitably, it got into the movies. And in fact, there were several movie versions made before the Disney version came along.
Right. And one thing that I always fascinate me about Disney is when he makes, adaptations. In a sense, for example, with the Snow White, it was an adaptation. Pinocchio is an adaptation, but the original ideas are really dark stories. I mean, just think about it, right? Even with Pinocchio, if you read what happened all the way through, it's kind of, oh my God, it's crazy. In the first part of the first chapter, I think, if I'm not wrong, in the book, and this is a spoiler, I have to say this, in the first chapter of the book, Pinocchio kills the cricket, and there's no cricket. Does. Yeah, and right. This is something that just think about it. But how Disney was able to say, hey, hold on for a second. Here we have a character that will be a fantastic sidekick, for Pinocchio to go together in all the adventures. I think it's just fascinating, the somehow love that Disney had, especially in the golden period, for dark stories. That's my view, right?
That's right. And in some ways, the Disney film is darker than the novel. For example, when Pinocchio goes to Pleasure Island, that is one creepy place. Oh. And in the novel, the parallel location, it's not nearly so sinister. It's actually kind of benign by comparison.
That's right.
And there are other in other ways. The Disney film really ventures into darker territory than the book does. On the other hand, the book has some distinctly unsympathetic characters in it, including Pinocchio himself. Pinocchio is a really, really bratty kid in Collodi's original story. And Geppetto, thanks to the Disney film, we think of Geppetto as a lovable, kindly old toy maker. And in the book, he's anything but. He's a gruff, cranky old guy who doesn't particularly like children. No. In the movie, Geppetto wants to have a son. He wants to have a child of his own, and it's this kind of touching, sentimental thing. Nothing sentimental about Geppetto in Collodi's book. He wants to carve a living puppet so that he can go around the world displaying this amazing puppet and make lots of money with it. That's his whole motivation. And as for Pinocchio, within the first, I think, 3 chapters of the book, he arranges to get Geppetto arrested and hauled off to jail. And so then he's on his own and he can do whatever he wants. And basically what he wants to do is raise hell. And that's when he encounters the talking cricket and smashes it against the wall. He's not a very likable little guy.
No.
However, if you follow the story all the way through, when there was that break between the 15th and 16th chapters, when Collodi thought he was going to end the story, and then he picks it up again. After that break, the story does become a little bit softer, and Pinocchio actually does reform his character in the course of the story, but it doesn't happen all at once. It happens very gradually by degrees until he becomes a much more sympathetic character by the end of the story.
Yeah, that is absolutely correct. I'm remembering, in the book, Collodi's book, that actually, for example, the character of Stromboli was not such a bad guy, if you wish. when he gave, some money to Pinocchio to give to his father because his father was short of money and was suffering and all that. And then Pinocchio, the brat guy, spent the money and never gave to the dad, right?
That's
So
right.
yeah,
That's
so
right.
it's something that is very interesting how one thing that is done in a certain way in the book is adapted in a completely different way, on the movie, and how in both ways, each in its media, right? Each in the literature or in a movie works perfectly fine.
That's right. And that's, I'm not going to get started on the subject of filmmakers adapting books. A lot of people get upset when a filmmaker changes anything in a book
That's true.
for the film version, overlooking the fact that writing is an art and filmmaking is an art, and they each have their own properties. They each have different properties, and the filmmaker is not just some kind of glorified messenger boy who is supposed to transfer everything intact onto the screen. The filmmaker's job is to make a good movie, and if this story makes good raw material to start with, that's great, but it's only a jumping off point. Now, almost everything in Disney's Pinocchio is based on something in the book.
Yes.
But sometimes it's based very, very loosely on something in the book. The idea of Geppetto having pets, the Figaro, the cat, and Cleo, the goldfish,
Yeah.
That comes the closest to something that has no roots in the story. But in fact, if you go back to the book, Geppetto does have a cat, but the cat is only briefly mentioned, and if you weren't paying attention, you might miss it altogether.
Yeah.
So building those characters up into entertaining personalities, that's part of the adaptation process.
Yeah, exactly. And in the story, in the book, it's very interesting to see how the way that Geppetto gets the piece of wood that he's going to use to make the Pinocchio, right? And it was Mr. Cherry, the one who gave him this piece of wood because it was magic and he didn't even know what to do with it. And he gave it away for free to Geppetto, who was like, wow, what a wonderful gift, right? So, for example, Disney never pay attention of from where the wood comes from. It doesn't matter. The important thing is that you can build this and you can have a wonderful future song, you know what I mean? So
right.
That's the whole story. So yeah, no, it's very, very, very interesting. I think I have never had the opportunity of being in the Pinocchio town in Italy. Have you had the opportunity of being there?
No, I have not.
Yeah, there is a Pinocchio town. I've seen some pictures and everything is around Collodi's book. And
yes.
And this is one of my bucket list kind of thing where, when I have the chance and the opportunity, most definitely I will be visiting and taking tons of pictures and sharing with you, sir.
Thank you. I'll look forward to that.
Absolutely. So I would like to talk a little bit about the different uses that during history, Italy has given to the character of Pinocchio for a second, right? And we all know how is the pride of the country, because probably is one of the most important books. And in the research that I have been doing, for my books, I discovered that Benito Mussolini's party, the fascist party, actually utilized Pinocchio as a symbol of fascism and use and create comics, where he will use the character to fight against the communism. So it's a very interesting approach if you think about it, how, something that could be done for kids, like the movie, could be used, in some other ways. And I think that also that that one important thing that we have to mention if we want to talk now, go a little deeper into the movie itself, is the Disney trip when he went to Europe with Roy
Yes.
and their wives and all that, right? They travel all around Europe, going to many, many places and all that. And there's some sort of confusion because in the part when they talk about the time that he has spent in Rome, it is said in some books, some other books say that this is not true, that he met with the family of El Duce, Benito Mussolini, right?
Right.
And that they were the ones who somehow push him to use the work of to produce Pinocchio in certain way, right? So, and some other books say no, they never met. They and all that kind of stuff. So, what do you have any information about that?
Well, he met with some members of the family. He didn't meet with Benito Mussolini
I don't
himself.
think so. Yeah.
No, no. But one of the interesting things about that trip is that when you read the newspaper accounts, and Didier Guez has written a marvelous book about the whole European trip. I highly recommend his book. It's called Disney's Grand Tour.
Yes.
But he revealed some of the interviews that were done with Disney while he was on this European tour, and they revealed that he was already interested in making a film of the story of Pinocchio.
That's true.
And I mean, this is in 1935 that he's talking to journalists there and bringing this up and actively showing an interest in the story. So I think this is just part of the tremendous creative explosion that was going on at the Disney studio at that time, because Walt was pursuing so many different ideas. At that point, they were just getting into the making of Snow White. And so he was pouring tons of energy into that. But at the same time, he was planning for success and already thinking about other projects that he would take on after Snow White was finished. And
Exactly.
Pinocchio was definitely on that radar.
Exactly. No, and one thing when people try to explain to me, no, because this association with politics of Disney and all that kind of stuff, I stop them right away and I say, yes, Pinocchio was associated with this tendency, whatever, political view. But then at the same time, what really wanted to do Disney was Bambi after Snow White, and he was not able to do it just because he wanted the drawers and animators to make a better drawings of animals. And if you see Bambi was written by a Jewish guy, and Bambi was prohibited book during the Second World War in Italy and Germany. I don't know if you knew this, but it was forbidden to be published or written or whatever, and he has to find his safe, in Switzerland. So that's what I'm trying to say. I mean, you cannot say how a person is because he meets here and there and whatever it is. He showed during his career his openness, and and the person that he was a devout Christian and all that. So that's the reason why I always say, don't even go there. It doesn't make any kind of sense. And
That's right.
that's my point of view. You know what? But anyway, so that's just my point of view, and I'm happy that you coincide with me, sir.
Yes, and I do. I think I don't know why some people today are determined to vilify Walt Disney.
Yeah.
Other than that, they like to vilify everybody because that's an unfortunate feature of the times we're living in. But the fact is that I think Walt really was apolitical. I think he didn't care about political differences or differences in ideology or anything like that. What he cared about in filmmaking was a good story, and what he cared about with his associates was their talent. And if you were a talented artist or if you had something to contribute, he didn't really care what your ethnic or national
That's
or
right.
political background was. He just related to you as a human being.
That's true. That's true. And there's tons of proofs of that. So, and this movie that we're going to talk about now, we're going to start talking now, Pinocchio, it was the big change of studios. Burbank, Hebron, and all that. So what a mess. I guess it was an absolutely mess, moving from a very tiny, small studio to a tailor-made studio and with different facilities and different things. That, I don't know. I'm sure it was kind of complicated.
Oh, it was tremendously complicated. And it is the case that they started working on Pinocchio while they were still in the Hyperion studio. And in fact, the great majority of the creative work on the film was done at the Hyperion studio. But by the time they were approaching completion, Snow White was finished. It had been released. It was just having a tremendous success all around the world. And this was helping to finance the new studio. Right. So at the end of 1939 and the beginning of 1940, the buildings were gradually being completed and the staff was making the move from one studio to the other. And I've always found it really interesting that some of the first buildings to be completed at the Burbank studio were the recording stages and the camera buildings. Excuse me. And because Walt didn't feel that the camera rooms at the Hyperion studio, as well built as they were and as state of the art as they were, he didn't feel that they afforded quite as much control as he wanted over dust control and things like that. Because when you're photographing cells, animation cells on a background,
right?
You know the process.
I know.
I mean, you're familiar with it, but for anybody who's not, you have the background painting. You lay the cells flat on that, unless you're using the multiplane camera. You lay the cells flat on the background. You clamp them down, and then you shoot one frame. If one little speck of dust gets caught in there, and then it's projected on a 20-foot theater screen, that tiny speck of dust is going to look gigantic.
Huge, yeah.
And so it was a constant battle to keep things like that from interfering when they were shooting the film. So at the new studio, they built a camera building that had just ultimate atmosphere and dust controls. People had to go through this airlock kind of arrangement just to get into the building, and they had white uniforms that they put on, and they handled the cells with gloves and everything. Just extreme atmospheric and dust control to make sure that everything was as perfect as it could be, and you see the results in the film. Snow White, I mean, again, as we agreed last month, Snow White is one of the most beautiful films ever made, and I wouldn't change anything about it. But there are times when you get, in some of the multiplane shots, you do get a little dust crawl there.
Right.
And not to go off on too much of a tangent, but in some of the digital restorations, there's been a debate about whether or not to take out that dust digitally, because some people have said, well, if Walt had the choice, he would have taken it out. Right. And other people have said, okay, well, there's dust in there, but it's 1937 dust, so it's part of the original. Right. So, you have two competing agendas there. With Pinocchio, you don't have to worry about that. Yeah. It's anyway. Sorry to go off on a tangent like that. But...
No. You know what? Well, hey, it's always a pleasure to listen to you. So no, don't worry about it. But I think that change in terms of buildings change also the relationships a little bit between the animators and Walt Disney, because Walt was more now in this area of the building where it was a little more separated. has the secretary and all the thing. And many animators, all the reference that I have read said that they miss the wall that was in their necks, and closing the shoulders and saying, hey, what are you doing? And checking on them and all that kind of stuff. I also guess that because at that time, the company was growing so much, with the big success of Snow White, that it was necessary because Walt Disney couldn't be everywhere, right? He also had to be supervising other things. Plus, he was preparing, Bambi, he was preparing Fantasia, of which we will be talking soon too. So I think it's a very complicated but fascinating time. That change, that time period, I think is absolutely fascinating.
I agree. It's pretty wonderful. And it's like with everything in life, there are pros and cons both ways. When you look at how crowded and makeshift a lot of the conditions were at the Hyperion studio, it's easy to understand why Walt wanted to, when he could, start all over again and build a studio from the ground up that would be custom designed for the way they were making animated cartoons then.
That's right.
So that they wouldn't have to deal with all of these makeshift solutions to problems. And in fact, they got that. And you can see they put a lot of care and a lot of thought into designing the new studio so that it would be just absolutely state of the art for the way the Disney company was then making animated cartoons. So everything was done for the comfort and safety and convenience of the artists. But sometimes what is good for the artist may not be good for the art. And I think a lot of them acknowledged that they were a lot more comfortable. They could relax. They could call a phone number and have a milkshake delivered to their office if they wanted it. I mean, it was designed to be the ultimate workplace experience, but they were isolated from each other, so they didn't have that camaraderie that they had in the chaotic, haphazard conditions of the Hyperion studio. And some of them found that they actually missed that and they wanted it back again. And as you say, Walt's relationship with them changed because he was in more of a central location and had to, it was more one-on-one each time he interacted with anybody, and they were more isolated from each other. Yes. Instead of being crowded in together, all of the top animators had their own offices with side offices for their assistants and everything. That's and so they didn't have the constant jostling and interaction that they had at the old studio.
That's true. Yeah, and that's quite important actually. Talking about the movie a little bit, I find, and we were talking before about how proud they are, the Italians, of this book. But when we see the beginning of the movie, we can only say we are in Bavaria, we are in Germany. But the way, the characters are dressed, Geppetto, and the way Geppetto dressed, also Pinocchio and all that kind of stuff. So it's quite interesting, right?
It is. I think even the most casual viewer has to admit that this is a very Germanic Italy.
It is.
My familiarity with Italy is in the northern region of Italy, and there is more sort of cultural crosstalk, I think, there in northern Italy with other European nations. But even allowing for that, this is a very sort of Teutonic Italy.
It is.
And I don't think that was an accident. I think that Walt and the artists made a concerted effort to sort of broaden the landscape of the story, and some of that comes from Geppetto himself, who, as you know, the voice and the live action model for Geppetto was an actor named Christian Rube, who was, of course, a German actor. Now, originally, when they first started working on this story, they were going to model Geppetto on a different actor, and this was a character player named Spencer Charters, who appeared in literally hundreds of films in Hollywood in the 1930s. You can scarcely see a Hollywood movie of the 1930s without seeing Spencer Charters.
Right.
He's all over the place. And for a while, he was going to be the model and the voice for Geppetto. And he was a very different physical type. He was shorter, rounder, and in fact, when you see some of the drawings that they made of Geppetto based on this model, he suggests Doc, the leader of the dwarfs in Snow White. And then, in fact, that may be one of the reasons that Walt decided to find somebody else. So they brought in Christian Rube instead, who also actually had he wasn't as ubiquitous as Spencer Charters, but he was an accomplished character player too. But the minute he started playing the part, everything changed, and Geppetto became much more Germanic. And you have, when you see the toys and clocks and everything in his there's a very kind of old world feel about this, and that has a tremendous visual appeal. So I think that the idea, whether it was conscious or not, I think the idea was to take the Italian cultural elements that were already built into the story and then combine them with elements of other European cultures, and make it a little more of a universal background. Wow. And of course, different critics had different reactions to that.
Yeah, and I want to ask you your opinion about something in particular. You just mentioned it, actually, all those clocks, cuckoo clocks, and, I was revisiting the movie 2 days ago just to be prepared for this podcast, right? And you notice is there are some cuckoo clocks that are absolutely crazy, like a hunter trying to hug a turkey, or a lady hitting in the bum, a child, and all that kind of stuff. So it was like, oh my God, viewing those things from actual point of view, those are crazy. But in that time, it makes all the sense, and that was, the different kind of cuckoos they were selling. And I make some research, and they are very similar to the kind of cuckoos that they sold during that time period in Germany, which is a very fascinating and interesting thing, right?
It is. It is. And it shows off the creativity of the story department too.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that I love about Disney's Pinocchio, is that you can see it over and over and over and keep seeing new details each time. It's so sumptuously packed with detail that you can see it over and over and always find new things. And in Geppetto's workshop, you can watch that clock sequence over and over, because the whole frame is packed with these imaginative ideas. And there's, they actually, the character model department actually built working models of some of those cuckoo clocks.
Oh, okay.
And Frank Thomas said later on that part of that was because Walt looked at some of the sketches and said, well, a thing like that would never work. And some of them took that as a challenge and said, oh, we can make it work. So they actually built working models of some of these crazy cuckoo clocks just to prove that it could be done.
Wow, that's just fascinating. It is, well, and, coming from Disney, I'm not surprised. You know what I'm saying? I bet he made that bet.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
With the people in the studio. Now, what do you think of the characters? I want to broaden the question in terms of the character. First of all, do you think that, and I know if Disney listens to the words I'm going to say, he will just, say a big no, but because I know that he warns against these articulations where you go trying to go inside the movie and try to find some symbolisms and everything, but there are a lot of Christian symbolism in the Pinocchio story. You have Geppetto praying, you have the fairy the blue fairy, there. The blue color is representation of the Virgin. You have the Jonas, with the whale and all that kind of stuff. What is your opinion about that?
Well, the best thing I can tell you is to refer you to a letter that was sent to the studio after the film opened from a clergyman, I think in Chicago, who suggested that the movie could be seen as a Christian allegory. And the letter found its way to Walt's office, and then there's a reply to this clergyman, not from Walt, but from his secretary, saying, well, thank you for sending this interpretation. The artists really didn't have this in mind when they made the film, but it's a very interesting interpretation, and we're glad to see it. So they stayed non-committal about that.
Yeah. Because I have heard so many theories, and I have read so many books about Pinocchio and different theories that they have. And anyway, it's kind of complicated. But I'm going to put you on the spot right now and tell me which of all the characters that are in the movie is your favorite.
Oh,
I know.
Well, I don't know if I can give you any better answer about this than I did about Snow White. Well, Jiminy Cricket is obvious. You can't not love Jiminy Cricket because he is a combination of Ward Kimball's animation and Cliff Edwards' voice. You've got both of those individuals combined in one character, and that makes a really rich character. So I like him a lot. I really like the Fox and Cat.
Yeah,
they are. Yeah. They are villains. I mean, they're bad guys, and they actually do harm in the course of the story. But they're also comedians, and a lot of the comedy comes from how inept they are in carrying out these machinations. Plus, they are beautifully animated by Norm Ferguson and his team.
Yes.
So I like them a lot too. I once again, I'm not sure I can narrow it down to just one favorite character.
Well, one thing that I noticed in the character that you just mentioned, the fox and cat, I think when they appear, the public knows right away a joke is coming.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Because it's like those 7-minute pieces, before the feature films in animation, when you have gags after gags after gags, right? Here you have the cat hitting the head with a hat, of the fox, and, hitting it again and going, so all that gives you a sense of comedy in the middle of the tragedy of the guy who has been kidnapped, by this gypsy guy, this Stromboli and all that kind of stuff. I have to acknowledge I'm fascinating with Vladimir Tilba. So I love his work all over. And I think Stromboli, that was the character that he animated, probably will be my favorite, because what I find there is that it has such a depth.
That's right.
It in a couple of seconds we see the best of him. when he's introducing, oh, here comes, a puppet without, strings. And then, when Pinocchio does fall on the stairs, when he was on the scene, he was like, what the hell? And then, he's like, oh, no, like, well, hold on for a second. Here, the guys, they like this, right? So
right.
How in a question of seconds, basically, and the same when they are inside, when he was counting the money, and at the beginning was very friendly with Pinocchio, and then he said, well, you go here and put him in a cage, right? So for me, what happened is in those special seconds or minutes, you can see all the possible variations of a character, from a string, being very kind, really sweet, really nice, to being the worst, possible character in the world. So that's what I am inclining to to like.
No, that's a very good observation, and yes, you're right. Of course, Bill Titler was one of the best animators ever, and he had such intensity.
Oh yeah.
And he got that intensity into the characters that he was animating. We talked last month about his animation of Grumpy, in Snow White, and yeah, I mean, Stromboli is such a volatile. Well, that is the name of a volcano, isn't it? And
I think it is, yes.
And that's an apt name for this character because he is so volatile. He's apt to erupt at any moment.
Oh yes.
And yeah, you're right. He's just people talked about how Titler would sit there for a while before he started animating a scene, and he'd be thinking about it and just gathering this intensity, and then it would just pour out onto the paper. And you really see that with Stromboli. He's just he's a force of nature.
It is. It is indeed.
So yeah, I respect your choice. That's
thank you. Thank you. Yeah, there are a lot of characters that are interesting. The only character that for whatever reason I'm pushed away a little bit is the fairy. I don't know why. Because in my view, and this is not a criticism, I'm not allowed, not even, I mean, like, how can I make a criticism of Pinocchio? But it's too real to be in Pinocchio's movie, in my view, in a sense that here you have a toy, is a puppet, that walks, and certainly, the other characters are more like easygoing kind of characters. And then you have the fairy who comes, it's all shiny and all absolutely perfect, and does two things, and and everything is wonderful. That's the character that somehow I guess that I wanted to see a little more developed, if I'm allowed even to say that, in that sense. It's in my view anyway. But of course, I'm
well, that's a really interesting point. I mean, you're right. She is sort of not from the same world as the other characters are, which in a way works because she is otherworldly. She does come from beyond our normal, mortal experience here. But that's a really interesting way to look at it. I guess my thought is that if there's one main thing that I love about this film, it is that it's all about the boundless possibilities of animation.
That's true.
It's just, if you know anything about the backstory, about Snow White. Of course, Snow White is this beautiful film. It goes out and starts just setting the box office on fire all over the world. So suddenly Walt believes, and he would be brought down to earth soon enough, but at that moment, he believes that he has no more limits on him at all. That's the song, I've got no strings on me, that could have applied to Walt at this point. He
Yes.
feels that there's nothing to hold him back. And I think that you get encapsulated in this film Walt's feeling that he is free to explore limitless possibilities in the world of animation. And that's why you see them experimenting and trying out new techniques and coming up with these amazing eye-popping effects on the screen and so on. And part of that is that you get this whole range of characters. I always think it's interesting that Geppetto, one of his pets is a kitten that, projects this wonderful kind of feisty little personality, but he moves and looks like a real cat.
That's true.
In the same movie, you have the fox and the cat and the sidekick, who is also a cat, but is nothing like Figaro. Yeah. He's a slapstick comedian. And, they're both technically cats, but they are utterly different kinds of creatures. And I think it's a sign of the immense range of this film that both of these cats can coexist in the world of this movie.
That's right.
And I guess that would be my defense of the Blue Fairy. She is not like any of the other human characters in the film, but this canvas is so enormous that it can encompass that as well as the caricature.
Absolutely. I agree with you on that. It's just that it's because the movie, there are some elements of the movie that are, for example, when they go to Pleasant Island and all that are so dark and so, and then you have this shiny lady. It's fascinating. That's my view, right? So it's something very, very different, from what it is. Now, let me ask you. Sorry, go ahead. You want to say something?
I was just going to say that it's also, and I mean, we could talk all day about this, but I think we're talking about the big five. The first five major Disney features.
This
right. Is the second one. One of the things that I find fascinating is that each one of those films has a different style.
That's true.
You could never mistake one for another. And in fact, you could argue that Fantasia has more than one because each of its segments has kind of a distinct style of its own.
That's right.
But in the case of Pinocchio, the Blue Fairy was animated by an artist named Jack Campbell. And Jack Campbell had been an assistant in one of the units that animated the character Snow White in the film Snow White.
Right.
And in the meantime, Ham Lusk, who was one of the main animators of the girl, had gone on to more of an administrative role at the studio, and Grim Natwick, the other one, had left the studio altogether. So Jack Campbell kind of became the heir apparent, and whenever they needed the scene with a pretty girl, Jack Campbell was the animator for it. That was sort of his specialty. So you have him giving lectures to the other animators who were assisting him on the Blue Fairy, saying that already the high standard that they had established for Snow White wasn't high enough. Now we have to do better. And he was pointing out the details, So that's another interesting thing about the Blue Fairy, is that she inherits the artistic legacy of Snow White, but then they compel themselves to take it a step further.
Yeah, I agree with you on that 100%. Yeah, the animation of her animation is just fantastic, and the design and everything, it's overwhelming how beautiful she is. Now,
but I take your point. Not to give the wrong impression here. I take your point, and that's an interesting take on her.
Now, I want to go to the Red Lobster. the place where they met and make the exchange and say, hey, I have this puppet, no strings, and oh, I'm collecting bad guys and all that, and they decide to take Pinocchio, to the pressure island. What do you think of all that time during the movie, when Pinocchio was somehow safe in a way, from the first adventure of Stromboli and blah, 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 blah. And then, once again, he falls into the same mistake, that thing, and fool me once, fool me twice, right?
Right.
So in this case, I think that we can apply that. So what do you think of that part of the movie? I'm very curious, and I also want to know your opinion on Pleasure Island, because can you imagine making a movie these days with tobacco, alcohol for kids, or on playing pool or whatever? That will be something that's one of the things that I like about Disney, is that he used whatever it was at hand, to portray whatever he had to portray.
Well, that's right, and in fact, that's one of the clearest indications. This is not just a movie for the kiddies. This is a movie for literally for all ages. And yeah, it's also, as the thing that I was saying a little while ago about the unlimited canvas that Walt saw here for making animated cartoons. One of the corollaries there is that no idea was off limits. And when the story department first started working on the Pleasure Island sequences, they were picturing it as a fairly mild place where kids could get all the ice cream they wanted, but the main trouble that they might get into might be overeating. It wasn't like they were actually going to do anything really bad, and it was Walt who pulled them away from that and said, no, this is let's go all the way with this, and so these kids were really being encouraged to run wild and raise hell on Pleasure Island, and Walt wasn't about to back away from the dark aspects of what they could do there.
Wow. Yeah.
And so no, I think that is very, very much intentional, and if some of those elements seem a little bit shocking, I don't think that's an accident. I think that he wanted you to feel a little bit of shock that Pinocchio is being led into this lifestyle.
Yeah. And also, what I think is a very scary moment in the movie is when the kids are changed, they change and to become donkeys, right? And they're put in those cages, be sent, to the mines or whatever other place, right? Or the circus or whatever, right? And how they kept in the corner those kids that even though they have transformed in donkeys, they still talk.
Yeah,
so
they haven't. Yeah,
they haven't transformed themselves, right? I think that being a kid, I have to admit, the first movie I watched on the cinema from Disney was Bambi, because of my age, but I have to tell you, the truth is that I find that little corner, the way it's lighted, with the shade, and it's fascinating how to create a scene of terror that, and in seconds, and this is what I admire more, it's like in seconds, you know exactly what is going on. In seconds, what is the situation, and in seconds you can know how the characters are.
That's right. And it's and yeah, there again, nothing is off limits. If the idea is to show the terrible fate that's waiting for these kids at Pleasure Island, Walt is going to pull out all the stops and show you just how bad it is and how terrifying it can be. And yeah, the sequence that's right adjacent to that, where Lampwick starts to transform into a donkey, that's been held up as an example of horror film technique, the camera angles and the cutting and so on. It is a frightening episode.
It is.
You know, we talked last month about the censors in the UK who wanted to keep people from taking children to see Snow White because some parts of it might be too frightening. Well, wait till those kids get a load of Pinocchio. I mean, this is when it in its darker moments, it is a very, very frightening film.
It is. And you know what I find in Pinocchio more than in Snow White or any, well, we will talk also about Fantasia, but what I find in Pinocchio is how the animators, how Disney use the shades, you know, different shades of things and shadows and these. Mm-hmm. It's fascinating because the transformation into a donkey happens, you know, with a shadow, and then, you know, you see little parts of the animal here, and it's like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, it's happening. Please don't happen to Pinocchio. But then part of it reaches to Pinocchio, right? So
yeah. Then he sprouts the ears and so on. Yeah, and that again, that is classic horror film technique. You know, if you see some of the real horror classics, Frankenstein and so on,
right,
a lot of their effects are achieved by suggestion. Right. You know, you don't push things in the audience's face. You suggest them, and some of the key moments actually take place off screen, which forces you to use your imagination.
Right.
And that is a powerful tool for the filmmaker.
Yes, it is fantastic. Now, the last part of the movie, you know, I think that Master of the Whale is absolutely fantastic, and the animation that they make of the water of the sea, and how this is something that I really like to see in movies, is how they introduce the character without introducing himself. Like, you know, when Pinocchio and the cricket are, you know, in the water, and they say, hey, do you know where I can find, and all the fishes of the ocean and all the animals, they just run in the opposite way, because, you know, it's like, oh my God, just even the name is too scary.
Even the mention of his name, that's right.
Exactly, it's too scary, right? So I love that they are able to introduce a character without even showing. So when you meet with a character, you say, oh my God, poor Geppetto inside of the belly. You know what I mean?
Right.
And give us extra power to Pinocchio, in a sense that he has changed so much, and he's so brave now that he will do anything to save his father, and goes inside the belly of the whale to help him, right? So
that's right.
I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, it is just amazing, and on every level, you know, on a technical level, and as far as the artistic technique. It's the whole movie is a gem, and because it's filled with things like that, every new section of the story introduces some new kind of challenge, and they find the most creative and the most lavishly picturesque way to meet that challenge.
Yeah, and it's when you know, when they are inside the belly, it's very funny, because, you know, Geppetto is only focused on getting fishes, you know. So he's like, oh, another one, and he doesn't even realize that Pinocchio is there, right? So, right. So, and later on, right? So I think this is an absolutely fantastic and an amazing movie. I think that I will put it to the same level as Snow White in terms of my taste, you know, in terms I cannot choose which movie I like best, because it's impossible. I mean, you know, when Disney produced, you know, it's impossible to say this is better than the other one. You know, it's
no, I absolutely agree.
Especially the Golden Age. You know, the Golden Age is one masterpiece after the other masterpiece. And I just want to start finishing, but what do you think it was the reaction of Roy Disney when he gave his brother $2.6 million to produce Pinocchio and only made $1 million? Can you imagine his face?
Well, actually, we have his memos, so we know we know more or less. And in fact, he was, again, he was always supportive of Walt.
Yes, I know.
And so, this is one of the things, when I do these books, part of the idea is to take all these stories that have been told over and over and over for generations and get rid of those stories and start over again with what we can actually verify from the historical record, and build the house all over again from scratch with what we know to be historically accurate. So the story that you always hear about Pinocchio is that it wasn't as successful as Snow White because the European market was cut off because of the war.
Yeah.
Well, that was a factor, but it wasn't the only one.
The only one.
Even just domestically, Pinocchio was just not as successful at the box office as Snow White was. Mm-hmm. And you can see because Roy was in New York for the opening of Pinocchio at the Center Theater. Mm-hmm. And then he's writing reports back to Walt and saying, well, that's really not so bad. That box office take is not really so bad when you consider this and this and this.
Right.
He's doing everything he can to maintain a positive attitude and support what his brother wants to do. But it is the case that it didn't make back its negative cost. Now that doesn't mean it was a box office disaster.
Oh no,
not at all. It was successful enough that for an ordinary film, its take at the box office would have been perfectly acceptable. But Pinocchio was a very, very expensive film. It was far more expensive than Snow White because they thought that they had a blank check now and they could do whatever they wanted.
Right.
And so they just laid on layers and layers and layers of production value. It cost a lot of money, along with the cost of the new studio that they were moving into.
Yeah, it was a mix of various things. I agree. Yeah.
So there were a lot of factors involved, but yeah, I mean it is the case that this was Roy's department and he had to be concerned, and then the same thing happened later in the same year. Later in the same year with Fantasia.
Fantasia was the same problem,
which also was a very elaborate film.
Yeah.
And also failed on its first release to make back its negative cost. So at that point, of course, Roy was concerned, and that leads into the whole episode of what's happening in the early 40s as they are going forward with Bambi, which was still in the works, and another expensive film altogether, but at the same time also tackling low-budget films that could be made more quickly and more economically and get out into theaters and start generating some more income.
Wow, believe it or not, we have been talking for 1 hour, and we can be here all day talking about Pinocchio because there are so many little details and so many little things. I just want to give you the last word and tell those generations of youngsters these days that watch other kind of movies, or they watch 3D movies and all that kind of stuff, why they should, if they are interested into animation, why they should start watching from the beginning, you know what I'm saying, and have some background history and understanding that all the elements that we have been discussing, rather than just, a computer doing something. I don't know. What do you think, GB?
Well, I would say that these early films, and again, we talked about this last month with Snow White, about the excitement that the artists felt knowing that they were doing something new and wonderful and groundbreaking. That still applies to Pinocchio, and in a way, I think you could say that Pinocchio is sort of the formal masterpiece of the craft of making an animated film. Every element in it is just polished and amplified to its absolute extreme. Again, you can see this movie over and over and over and find new qualities in it that you never did before. I would say to those audiences that haven't seen it yet, that the very best people who are in the animation industry today, and this is nothing, I don't mean to disparage them at all, because there are some very, very talented people, and some of them are friends of mine. But if you talk to the very best people, the top people in the industry, they will tell you that they are still looking to Pinocchio as the high watermark of animation technique, and still striving to measure up to the standard that Walt and his artists achieved in that film.
Yeah,
it's if you want to see the closest possible thing to perfection, in technical perfection, and along with storytelling technique and so on, you can't do any better than Walt Disney's Pinocchio.
absolutely. I agree with you, sir, 100%, more than 100%. It's one of the movies that, when I watched it, when I was just a teenager or so, I said, well, this is one of the reasons why I want to dedicate to animation, because it was not just a single movie. It's a perfection movie, where absolutely everything is perfect.
It is, and it's inspiring, because you can see an imagination that is just completely unleashed, and can wander into these wonderful worlds of fantasy, and just deliver just such an amazing experience.
Yes, that's right.
It's inspiring and exciting all over again each time you see it.
Exactly. So, sir, thank you so very much. It's always a privilege talking to you.
Well, thank you, and it's a pleasure talking with you. I'm glad to be back with you again.
Oh, absolutely. You know that we can with you for our podcast, because you have very wise words to say to us, and that I really, really appreciate. And your knowledge you are, like absolutely amazing. You are a deep hole of knowledge that never ends.
Well, thank you. You are too kind. Thank you.
No. We appreciate you here, and we'll be talking to you soon. And to the rest of our viewers, please stand by, because here comes the Animation Roundtable. Thank you very much. Thank you, JB.
Thank you, Raquel.
No problem. Hi, friends of cartoon researchers and educators. Welcome once again to our podcast. We had the pleasure of having the interview with J.B. Kaufman. And now we have here the 4 gentlemen and 2 ladies of the Animation Roundtable. Yes, for all of you who doesn't remember them or me, I'm Raquel Benitez. I'm an animation production and director, and a huge Disney fan who, of course, collects anything that has to do with the golden age. Carmen is an animation producer and director as well, and she has been in the industry for 20-some years, and also she's a collector. Do you want to say something, Carmen?
No, but I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Then we have Steve Spain. Well, his name, is well known in the collector's world. So why don't you introduce yourself, Steve?
I'm Steve Spain. I'm a Disney nerd, fan, collector for 35 years or so, and happy to be here.
Wonderful. Then we have Gustavo Rodriguez, who is in the old big city of New York. So welcome, Gustavo. Tell us something about yourself.
Well, great to be here. Thanks for having me, Raquel. Yes, I'm also a collector and dealer and aficionado of Disney's, particularly the Golden Age, so the Hyperion Studios and the early Burbank years. And I'm very excited
Yeah,
to talk about it.
and he's the guy that is guilty, the reason why I don't have any money. But that's another story. Okay, now we go to the other part of the ocean. We go to Europe. And today we have two dear friends from Europe. We have Nunziante, who you already know, who comes from all the way from Italy. Nunziante. Ciao, caro amigo.
Hello, hi everyone.
Ciao.
Okay, and then we have a new friend today who's going to join us from the UK, Bob, who actually has written some books about animation, especially about Disney. And he's going to give us his perspective about Pinocchio. Go ahead, Bob.
Hi, nice to be invited. Thank you very much. I've been a collector for just over 50 years now. And, well, that's why I have no money either. However, it's a great way to lose money.
It is the best. It is the best. It is the best. That's for sure. So, friends, our subject today is, as you know, Pinocchio. That movie that absolutely touched your heart and stays in your soul forever. And now I just leave the field open to everyone, but I just have here my my good luck glass, which one of the characters, as you can see, is Pinocchio. And I'm going to read what it says here just to start the conversation. It says, Pinocchio had to be brave, truthful, and unselfish to become a real boy. What about that? What do you think, guys?
I think I'm going to send you a free gift, Raquel.
Oh,
I'm going to upgrade your glass. I'll show you.
okay. Thank you.
This is an original 1939, 1940 glass Pinocchio.
No way. Oh my
You
God.
need to get that one. That's one you need
Gustavo.
to do. Good luck.
Oh my
We'll
God,
talk later.
Gustavo. Thank you so very much. That's really highly appreciated. Wow. Okay. So you guys, what do you think what about this movie? Let's start, with your general thoughts about this movie. What's your opinion about this movie, generally speaking? Anyone can start.
Wow. Can I start?
Oh, please go ahead, Steve.
All right. I know this is very subjective, but many people think that Pinocchio is Walt's masterpiece. Snow White was a beautiful film, but it had a few rough edges. Pinocchio was probably the only film that Walt was able to do with basically an unlimited budget, and it shows. And technically and artistically, with the beautiful backgrounds, the extensive use of the multi-plane camera, the water effects, it to me is a candy for my eyes.
It's a nice way to put it. I like that. I had exactly the same feeling that in Snow White and the Silly Symphonies was lots and lots of different practice runs. It was something completely new for animation. And I think for me that one of the real points for Pinocchio is the fact that they managed to get a lot of emotion into faces, including Figaro in particular. It's not easy to show emotion on a face, and up until Snow White, and for a small amount of Snow White, that is, I think most of it was done by action and slapstick. But as soon as you add the music and the emotions into the features, you get the masterpiece.
It is what it is. It's a masterpiece. Absolutely.
Well, I think between there's a progression that you see from the Silly Symphonies, some of the Silly Symphonies through Snow White and Pinocchio. If you watch those all those films in succession, you can really truly appreciate the leaps that were made, particularly where, as Bob said, but in personality animation, that was the Disney Studios' real trademark, which is why maybe some people will take a notch away from maybe Fantasia, because it lacks some of the personality animation you see, particularly in Snow White and Pinocchio, which was very revolutionary, new, where you actually cared. You felt there was more volume to the characters, both physically and emotionally. it's amazing to look at now. It's amazing to appreciate, to see, particularly how quickly it happened in the span of a few years in the mid-1930s, early to 1940.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, Nunziante, did you want to say something?
I was listening and I was thinking, I'm Italian, so for us in Italy, Pinocchio is like Alice in Wonderland and Peter Pan for England and The Wizard of Oz for America. So it's been always, for some people, difficult to accept the Disney version of Pinocchio. But I think it's still the best cinema version of our beloved book. Pinocchio is not an easy book to portray in images, and I think the Walt Disney version it was like all the characters, if you read the book, are something. They mean something, and I think the characters in Disney mean the same thing. Even it seems it's not they are different, but they are not so different from the original. If you compare well the book and the cartoon, and so I think it's to this day is still the best cinema version I've seen of Pinocchio.
I'm curious. I'm going to ask a question. What other adaptations of the film? I'm not familiar with any actually. Of prior to Disney's version. What other films
Prior
adaptations?
to Disney, I'm not aware of any. After Disney, there are many of them. But I agree. I wanted to say that I agree 100% with what Nunziante is saying. I mean, the original book, the Collodi book, it was probably one of the hardest books to read, in a sense of all the adventures that happen, but how they happen, I was discussing with JB how in basically the first readings of the book, Jiminy Cricket is killed. When actually in Disney movie, goes all the way the movie, it's exactly with a hammer.
He kills him.
So it's a very brutal, there are some times, and that where it's very brutal. However, well, don't forget that the story that Collodi wrote started with 16 chapters in a kids magazine, and then, a newspaper, as you say. And then, it was such a big success that went all the way to 36 chapters. So it's a fantastic story. I even know that I haven't been there. That's one of the things that I have in my bucket list. There is a town in Italy, Nunziante, you can correct me here, that has everything about Collodi and about Pinocchio and all that.
Yes. Yes, there is, but in Italy, we had in the 60s a beautiful TV adaptation of the movie by the director Luigi Comencini, with actors, and Nino Manfredi played Geppetto and Gina Lollobrigida played the fairy. Wow. And it was very, very popular at that time. And so, but I always found that even Luigi Comencini, that wanted to portray the real Collodi Pinocchio, used some Disney ideas. For example, even in that version, if you see it, was also there was also a version dubbed in English. In that version, the fairy comes to give life to Pinocchio at the beginning, like in the Disney movie. So sometimes, many times, when directors say, we bring you the real Pinocchio, not the Disney version, even Roberto Benigni made this. And when I saw the Roberto Benigni version, I said, you are a liar because you say you bring to the people the real Collodi Pinocchio, and then what does you do, your wife, at the beginning as the blue fairy in the Geppetto's house? And what does the cricket do in the Pleasure Island? If you do the real Pinocchio, then you must kill the cricket and the fairy comes after. Don't be liar. So that's the thing. But also in Italy, we, as public, the general public was so fond, even they don't say it, was so struck by the Disney version that we in Italy have already many people that think that in Collodi book there is the whale, but the whale is a Disney invention.
Yes.
In the Collodi book there is a shark.
Yes. Yeah, I know. But one of the things that I think is fantastic about Disney is the adaptation that they did with the books. Because even if you think about a movie that we will be talking about later in our podcast, not today, but in 2 months, will be Bambi. And you know, in Bambi, you know, it was just a very short scroll. And even though it's the shortest movie of Disney, still he was able to create a lot of content. You know, the initial version was only 30 minutes and then, you know, it finished with 64 minutes. So one thing that Bob said, and I like to go a little deeper, if I may, is that connection, you know, of the face of the cat, you know, when he moves and all that. But how special is the animation having 2 cats? And how different they are one from another, don't you think, guys?
Oh, totally. For me, it's very strange that you can watch an animated movie and have totally different aspects of one animal. It's the same with Cleo, the goldfish.
Yes.
You see all the fish in the under the sea aspect when they're looking for Monstro, and they are definitely fish. They don't have particularly human aspects. That's whereas true. Cleo is very, very emotive, especially with Figaro.
I think that standard was set going back to having you know, Minnie Mouse having a pet cat and and Goofy Pluto being in the same team. They're both dogs.
Yeah.
That suspension of disbelief, it's weird, but it works somehow. I don't know.
Yeah, and the way, you know, they give life to them. I think actually when each time I see Honest John, for example, the fox, right? For those our friends who don't know by the name.
Foul fellow, he's got 5 different names.
Exactly, Honest John and
Worthington.
Yes, and exactly the whole name is the parts of the movie when Disney went back to the slapstick kind of animation that was, you know, in the Silly Symphonies and all that kind of stuff. It becomes, you know, the cat hit this fox, and, you know, in the head with a tall hat, and you know what I'm saying, and that becomes kind of a separate short, if you wish, you know what I mean, within our movie. And I think that's just fascinating.
Yeah. One of the things that I noticed when I watched Pinocchio again this week was that it doesn't have the flow that I remember. When I first watched it, I thought the whole thing just flowed beautifully. But in fact, it is very much a series of sequences that have just been hung together.
Yes.
And I think that's reflected particularly with the way that the background art works as well, because you move from one traditional inside view, which is absolutely packed with things. You go outside and you could be watching a completely different movie. That was
Yes.
one of the things that really, really struck out.
Yes, that's absolutely true. I think it's a complexion of different movies within a movie. That's for sure. It's like the whole scene that you have at the end with Monstro, you know, the whale, you know, that whole part of the movie could be, you know, like a small Silly Symphony or a small, you know, movie by itself, you know, because the way it is. Oh my God.
Someone else agrees with you. I'm sorry, I'm a prop guy.
You know, speaking with Gustavo is a big challenge because, you know, he knows so much and then he has so many things, you know, that is just absolutely amazing, Gustavo.
I
The
never
monster
thought
part
this.
is probably my favorite in the film. It's just so exciting and it's stunning. I still don't know how they quite know how they did everything they did in that sequence. It's just unbelievable.
Now,
Getting that whale to move that.
Yeah. Now, I wanted to go back a little bit about a time period where we all are aware of what happens. Okay, and you know that in 1935, Disney went to Europe. He had a huge tour in Europe. One of the countries that's where, you know, he actually started creating the big library of books that the Disney have, you know, in their archives, right? One of the stops was Rome. And, you know, city for where he did, you know, some statements that are very brutal. Like, you know, he said, anticipated that he will be doing Pinocchio. Now, there is a controversy about from where he got the idea. There is one theory that says that Walt Disney and Roy Disney met with Benito Mussolini, El Duce, while in Rome. There is another theory that says that no, it only met with the daughter and the son-in-law of the Duce, right? So here we are talking about a little bit of a political situation. What do you think it really happened there? How this whole idea of Pinocchio comes to come alive?
Well, I haven't seen any source that, like personally, that can verify that. If there is one, I'm sure I'd like to.
Yeah. Well, there are records, and also there is a record that he made with the most important Italian publisher, Nunziante. Help me here, Mon something.
Not Mondadori.
You see, Mondadori. Yes, exactly. He was one of the biggest publishers in that. And
I have some books of Pinocchio from Mondadori here.
Yeah, okay, cool. So one of the things actually that also I was speaking with JB before was that, I don't know if you know this, Pinocchio was used by Benito Mussolini and the fascism, you know, as a way of advertisement. And it was used to teach the kids how to be a good fascist, which is very scary. And what I love about Disney is that he was able to remove all that dirt, you know, from the original story. Well, the story didn't have any dirt, but I mean, you know, the use that was given to him, to it, the story itself, and put it in such a beautiful and absolutely amazing movie, you know, without any attachments to absolutely anything, right? What do you think? You know, don't you agree with me?
Yes. But the thing is that the Benito Mussolini and his sons were very fond of the Disney films, and so even when there is also I have friends that have written books about this. There is a book in Italy that's called Eccetto Topolino that tells the story of when all the comic books were prohibited by the fascism in Italy. there was a they said there was an autograph writ on the law that Mussolini said, eccetto Topolino, don't touch Mickey Mouse. So, he was so fond of Mickey Mouse, so, and he loved very much Snow White, and so you think Mondadori, even when there was the World War II and we were enemies with the Americans, continued to publish the story of Snow White. The Walt Disney book with the name Walt Disney on it was published. I have copies of it, published in all the 40s, even with the war. There was a strange thing. I have editions in Italian of the Walt Disney Snow White published during the World War. That's a little miracle. And the Pinocchio was about to be projected before, just after the American premiere. There were negotiation with the also because Arnoldo Mondadori and Walt Disney were friends. And so Roy Disney tried to speak with Mondadori to publish immediately the comic book and books. But then it was not possible because the war went over, and so we didn't see the movie until the 1947.
Yeah.
But Mussolini saw the movie in English.
Wow.
And until the last sorry for my English. Until the last minute, they thought it was possible to make an exception and show to Italy the film. But there was also another thing. The Paolo Lorenzini, that was the nephew of Carlo Collodi,
yes,
was made a sue to Disney and tried to
He hated it.
yeah. Trying to
so
stop the whole
I think that was the
Barrier.
the thing that that's prevented the movie to be shown in Italy.
Yeah. Now I'm gonna say just one word, and I want you to tell me, each of you, please, an answer. And I will start. Okay. So, favorite character in the movie. Mine is Stromboli. Carmen?
Jiminy Cricket.
Jiminy. Steve?
Oh, can I pick one that's already been picked, or do I need a new
Yes.
one?
No, you can pick whichever.
I think Jiminy Cricket.
Jiminy Cricket. Okay, Gustavo?
Oh, it's tough. I'm going to be different though. I love all the characters, every one of them. I love that Honest John. I love Walter Caitlin's personification of the character. But Honest John is just such a just stays in my head. I'm always the actor's life for me sequence. I love that.
Yeah.
But I love all the characters. Jiminy Cricket is right up there too. She's one of the great all-time.
Yeah, that's true. Bob?
I have to go with Figaro. I know it's such a small part, but it was so wonderful.
Figaro was so popular.
Yeah, and I mean, what was it? Another 5 shorts Figaro managed to appear in.
Minnie Mouse.
Yeah,
including Figaro and Cleo, which was based on the cut sequence inside the belly of the whale, where they were dreaming about eating Cleo.
Right. Figaro was, I think, the most. I read it. I think Figaro was the most popular of the merchandising items. It was the most popular little figurine to buy or popular little toy.
Yeah, I found that as soon as you cut Figaro, it lightened the mood again. And it was a very
oh, Gustavo, come on, you're killing us. Sorry, Bob.
severe one.
No, please go ahead, Bob. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, I was just saying that it's a very serious movie, and something that I think parents would have to be with their kids to watch at the time, because it's all about growing up sensibly, which I mean, I actually jotted down a little piece because I'm 25 years of teaching young children. I put, children are not born bad. And I think that's basically what Pinocchio tells us.
Yeah.
Very, very easily swayed.
Yes.
Also, I think that the critic Roger Ebert pointed out something why the film doesn't sit well. I noticed particularly with younger generations, they're very disturbed by the film for different sequences in a way that I'm not, honestly. I think it can be a very dark film. But there's Roger Ebert pointed out a very interesting thing people overlook is in the story, it's the only, in fact, it kind of violates the code, the censorship code in some ways. It's a film where none of the villains is held accountable for it. It's punished for anything.
Yes.
They all get away, all the villains, whether it's Stromboli, Honest John, the coachman especially. I think it's the most vile villain is the coachman. They all get away with what they do. And that thing that hangs in the air, I think, after the films, in a way people doesn't really, I didn't notice that till he pointed that out. I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah. And it's amazing how many villains turn up in the one film.
Wow.
Normally you have one villain and everybody rallies round to defeat the one villain. In this, you've got Jiminy Cricket basically trying to stop all the villains from winning.
Well, sorry to interrupt there, Bob, but
Yeah.
I think that Jiminy Cricket didn't do the job properly.
No, he didn't. I agree. And he shouldn't have got that badge at the end.
He didn't stop anything. And that's what upsets me, because, you know, he's supposed to be the conscience and help, but he's never there when Pinocchio needs him. So I find that very disturbing. So, you know, Pinocchio is supposed to behave as a good kid, but he doesn't know what is to be a good kid. And then he's given Jiminy to help him, and then he's left alone in the most important parts of the movie. And it's like, and some people say that the movie is about Jiminy Cricket, that Jiminy Cricket is the main character because he's the one that starts the movie and ends the movie. And he talks more than Pinocchio. So I'm like, we're giving them too much credit.
Actually, I think you've really hit on an important point there, because fairly early in making the film, Walt had to call a halt to it because he couldn't make Pinocchio likable. And the only way that they could do it was to introduce Jiminy Cricket in the end. And Pinocchio does very little more than say yes and no and what and why for a great deal of it. The time that Pinocchio actually suddenly takes over is when the dove brings the letter from the Blue Fairy to say that Geppetto's been swallowed by a whale, and he suddenly takes it into his head he's going to save him, and Jiminy Cricket just follows on.
Yeah, actually following what Bob is saying, you know, actually Jiminy Cricket only started to be animated 9 months after the whole movie started to be animated. So you know, it's such a main character, and how they have to redo the concept somehow and go back and say, hey, hold on for a second, we have to introduce this character, you know. And that's the reason why, if you notice in the movie, there are so many scenes where you have Jiminy Cricket by itself.
Yeah,
because it has to be introduced later on, you know, in the movie, right? But for me, the Jiminy Cricket, I mean, for me, the worst part of Jiminy Cricket is when he saw, you know, a Stromboli, you know, theater representation and the no strings puppet song and all that, and he's just, you know, in a light there, you know, and said, well, it seems to be okay. So you know,
Yeah, maybe I was wrong. Maybe this is
exactly,
a life for him. Yeah.
It's very
exactly.
interesting dramatically though, and it's very, very creative. And I like, and it's got the funniest line at that moment. It's, what does an actor want with a conscience anyway?
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Sorry, Nunziante, because I didn't ask you your favorite character.
My favorite character, I think, is the Blue Fairy, because her animation is incredible.
Yes.
And after this, in Italy, her Italian voice is one of our most beautiful dubbing actress, and so perhaps for this reason I like Blue Fairy very, very much, because like in the original book, she's the real Deus Ex Machina, if you understand. In the Deus Ex Machina is in the
Right.
Yeah.
She appears when all seems lost, on all seems all things are come to an end, and the story doesn't proceed if there is no help from some other being. And like in the original book, because you know, the original story, it was in chapters, published weekly, I think, in you
Yes,
said
it
it.
was.
And so the original story ended with Pinocchio being hung by the cat and the fox.
Yes.
But the readers began to write to the magazine, please, we don't want the story to end. And so Collodi invented the fairy. That was that in the original book at the beginning is a girl, the girl with the blue hair. And after time, Pinocchio meets her again, and she is grown up.
Yes.
It's, the character is a little different, but the meaning, the function of the character is the same. It's the Deus Ex Machina of all the story. And so I love her very, very much.
Frank Thomas was complaining.
By the way, the Italian voice is Lidia Simoneschi. Lidia Simoneschi was an actress that made so many characters for Disney in Italy. The voice is the Flora in Sleeping Beauty. In the first dubbing of Dumby is the mother of Bambi, and is also the fairy godmother in Cinderella, and Madame Mim in the Sword in the Stone. Wow. And the Lady Croc in Robin Hood.
And also,
she dubbed Angela Lansbury in Bad Knobs and Broomsticks. Think, a real Disney legend, as I say.
It's interesting that the top Disney animators, the 9 old men or the people in that orbit, they preferred to work on not much. They didn't really like as much to work on the realistic characters. Like Art Babbitt didn't love doing the Queen, the Wicked Queen, but he said his favorite thing he ever did was Geppetto.
Yep.
They or Mark Davis and those were very good doing. They were great draftsmen, so they would get assigned the more realistic characters that were maybe partially rotoscoped at times, but they would beg, please let me. I want to do Captain Hook. I don't want to do Wendy, and then they want the more realistic, less cartoon characters.
Yeah. It wasn't the actress that they used for the Blue Fairy, the one that they used for Snow White?
Yes, Marjorie Belcher.
That's true.
Yes, Marjorie Belcher,
who became married champion, and they became film star dancers. But,
that's true.
She was Snow White. She had a big overcoat on for the dance scene so that they could draw the 2 dwarfs that were dancing with her. And she did the the Blue Fairy.
Yeah, that is good. Sorry.
Yes, but
Married Art
in fact,
Babbitt, didn't she? She married Art Babbitt to start with.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true.
Yes,
That's true.
yes.
That's true. I have to admit that I have a weak point for Vladimir Titla. And, you know, of course, he animated Stromboli. So maybe that's the reason why Stromboli is my favorite character, right? And it's a character that I really admire. Now, I want to ask Steve something. Steve, you have tons of animation drawings and all that kind of stuff from Pinocchio. Now, I wanted to ask you, what was behind you deciding to go to acquire, you know, such a big collection for Pinocchio and other Snow White and so on?
That's a good question. I wish I could say it was, and there were several steps, of course, like a lot of people my age group, baby boom generation. I grew up with Disney, the original Mickey Mouse Club after school, The Wonderful World of Disney, Wonderful World of Color on Sunday evenings when Uncle Walt would come into our homes. But I think it was my appreciation for this art was when I was a senior in college. I got a job as a movie projectionist back when that was a job, when films really were on film, and went through the film gate at 24 frames a second. And I started watching these films over and over. I said, gee, this is just beautiful work, much different than what I was watching on Saturday morning cartoons. The lavishness of it, the meticulous blend. And so it was then that I became interested. I started watching the credits and saw the same names. And then about 10 years later, I was at my public library and stumbled upon a book by John Canemaker called Treasures of Disney Animation Art. And I saw in the back of that book a couple of dealers that had sources for original art. And I was surprised that this art was available. I assumed it was all in the Disney archives. And so two guys, one on the West Coast, one on the East Coast. I traveled to both coasts. It started, I was going to own, if I could just own one piece of original Disney art, that would be wonderful. And then it was, if I could only have maybe one piece with a background, that would be wonderful. And it just grew and grew and got out of hand, I guess.
I
Collection is so great.
I feel your pain, Steve. I feel your pain. Now let's go to the movie for another second here, and I want us to talk about which one do you think is the scene that is most representative of Pinocchio? What if you want to say, wow, Pinocchio is this? Which image will you choose?
Ooh, that's a difficult one.
Yes.
For me, I think as a long scene, it's the morning after Pinocchio's been given life, where they use the multiplane to come all the way down from the tops, all the way down through, focus on Geppetto's house, and you see all the children going off to school. Pinocchio comes out because it sort of encompasses all the really big developments that were shown up in that film.
Yeah.
Well, what's also interesting point that's I completely agree, Bob. It's a really well chosen moment. And what's super fascinating about that little moment, lasts I think about 46 seconds in the film, that multiplane, the most complex multiplane movement up to that point. It was it cost over $100,000 to do that, just that one 46-second scene, more than it would cost to do a Mickey Mouse short, an entire Mickey Mouse or Silly Symphony short. And it doesn't even really, if you think of it, you could have cut it out. It doesn't change the story, it doesn't alter the story, it wouldn't have hurt the story. It's not absolutely crucial and necessary, but it also is at the same time. It stays in your head, and it's such a, the way it just transports you into that world is actually, to this day, is completely remarkable.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. For me, one of my favorite ones is actually, well, of course, the multi-plane scene at the beginning is something that you can't deny. Probably I would choose the first one, that. But if I had to choose a second one, I will say that all the scene that happened with the whale, the big fight, those tides going up and the sea and the water, and how you feel when the whale is hell, and exhales again, and how the bottle and the Pinocchio and the little raft where they were, goes inside and then it goes out again and all that. Oh, come on. That has to, I always say that there are so many things in animation that should be taught in art schools, because that cannot find a better way to describe movement than that particular scene. How the water moves and the whole scenario itself, how it's created and all that. I think that is absolutely fascinating.
But Raquel, when you ask about the most representative, for me, growing up is when his nose grows. And that's what, everybody remembers. Oh, if you lie, your nose is going to grow. And the way that I remember that, I thought that it happened throughout the whole movie. That was one of the key features of Pinocchio. But it only happens once. And a small little thing that happened in a moment there, for me, it carried through the whole movie, and it carried throughout my life, thinking, that was something that usually happened to him when it only happens once. And I think it's because it caused that impact in me that for me, it was like, oh, yeah, like the presence of the prince in Snow White. The way that I remembered it, he was present all the time, but he only appears at the beginning, at the end. So I think that there are, some things that I remember from movies when I was little, that then watching them again, being older, is a completely different way of looking at things.
Yeah, and the question will be, following your lead, Carmen, how come we pay more attention to the nose that grows and not, to the action that happens at the end when he turns himself into half donkey? You know what I'm saying? And it's like, wow, he has big ears, he has a tail and all that kind of stuff, which is also, very characteristic thing, from the story, right? So it's I don't know. I think it's fascinating, the growing of the nose. And
but I think that, being little, because you are usually are not allowed to smoke or drink or do all those things, you don't think they're going to turn into an ass. But if you're little and you lie, then your nose may grow. So I think that it's the getting, more, feeling more attached or closer to Pinocchio in that part.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Actually, it is a very good point. Now, what about the music? What about the music in Pinocchio? Okay, I see some smiley faces there on the screen right now.
I think Nunziante is gonna sing.
Sorry?
No, I'm just always, again, how many things could Walt Disney be good at? Like, and I don't know if he's not a musician, but somehow his feature films all have multiple standards in them. It's remarkable. And these songwriters that work pretty much exclusively with the Disney studios. They weren't writing other musicals, but they wrote songs that last forever. They're stuck in your head. They're When You Wish Upon a Star, I Diddly Dee, Give a Little. These are all bang bang. These are all major songs. I mean, they're jazz artists perform and interpret them to this day. This film after film, Frank Churchill and Ned Harlan, all these amazing musicians, and they're great composers and songwriters.
Yeah.
And it's had hit after hit with all these films.
You know, lately for the last day, sorry, Steve, I leave you now the word. The only song that I keep in my head is like, Give a Little Whistle. Oh my God, it's driving me crazy. I hear it all the time in my brain. So sorry, Steve, you wanted to say something?
I was just going to say that even the songs that aren't really songs, just the sound effects from the carved characters and instruments in Geppetto's workshop are so beautiful. It's like you're in a toy store. And I think they add to the charm and richness of the film as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the old music box is the theme, isn't it?
Yes. And also, sorry, it's not about the music, but while you were talking about the music box, I was thinking, you know, on the clock wall, you know, all the cuckoos that he built, you know, the big Geppetto, right? And how they were depicted, you know what I'm saying? Like a kid being, you know, kind of a little hit, you know, by the mother. Well, not a little, but a big hit by the mother, you know, and you know, a guy cutting the turkey head, and I don't know how many others. It's just fascinating, you know, the mentality, and also not mentality, but so much the imagination of those animators who were able to do that sort of thing, right? That creativity.
Yeah, Albert Herter was one of the artists, but he was also a model maker, and he made a lot of those models.
Yes.
Actually as they are, and the scale model of the coach from the Coachman, which was sprung. So that
that's actually a wooden. That's actually a piece of live action that some people don't realize. A little carriage that goes by Stromboli's carriage.
Yeah.
But you also bring up here before we forget, this was the first Disney film in which, thanks to Joe Grant, that maquettes, models were used to help use for reference. That's a very significant thing, and it begins with Pinocchio. And I think it's worth noting as well that models were used, physical, not just human beings. That was also still being done to, you know, try to capture movement, but also they were creating these cartoony, unrealistic. Trying to capture these unreal, non-human kind of forms in three-dimensional versions, you know. And that's I think that's a big, that affects the quality of the animation, the fact that we're using these figures for reference.
And remember how difficult it would have been to animate the moving carriage with the swinging bird cage within it. And Frank and Ollie's Illusion of Life book, they talk a lot about that. But when you have 2 or 3 things going on in synchronization, that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
I think that brings you to the lighting effects as well, doesn't it? Because that particular scene, having the lightning come through, and you've got all the different color schemes, that's amazing. In the same way as the piece Under the Sea, where they used a piece of glass that they just moved through the camera to give the ripple effects.
The flare. And I've never seen in any other film, even Little Mermaid or these films that'll take place underwater. I've never seen it as quiet, as convincing, or as beautiful as the underwater sequence of Pinocchio. I don't even try to come close to doing that. Whatever they did, however they did all that.
Yeah. That's true. You know, one of the characters that always and people don't think it's a character by itself, but I think it's very much a character, you know, what Disney called stupid little men. You know, those black shadows, you know, at the end, you know, that are the helpers, you know, to when, you know, they are separating the good donkeys from the bad donkeys, if you want to call it in that way, you know, just how through a completely black character, it's just a shade. It doesn't have, it only have the human body, but we don't have a face of them. You know what I mean? And there is no explanation kind of where, you know, and how and all that kind of stuff. I think that character could be really, really scary and expressed so well and they're such a wonderful company, you know what I'm saying, for the whole situation that's going on, you know, this donkey to the mine sold and this donkey to the circus and this donkey to here, to there, or whatever. I think that's fascinating me, you know, the whole thing, that how many things you can express with just a shade. It's, I think is
The choice to not what not to show is always fascinating. You know, what not to. I was just watching Fantasia today, and just the opening sequences. You know, how Deems Taylor and all the people in the orchestra, you can barely see their faces. It's such a daring choice to make, to show do that kind of minimal kind of exposure, to create that mystery, to create that atmosphere.
right.
And that's a great example you just pointed out, Raquel, the minions as helpers of the coach.
Exactly. You know, and actually, we are going to be talking next time, you know, about Fantasia. Obviously, we are going in order, you know, before Snow White, Pinocchio, Fantasia. And one of the things that when I read a book about Fantasia, and I'm just going to make this little note here, was that the people who actually we see the shades, you know, on Fantasia at the beginning, were Walt Disney's employees. You know, they were workers of his animation department and special effects and ink and color and all that kind of stuff. They were not maestros, you know, from that particular orchestra, you know. So that's something that always fascinated me. Anyway, so I don't want to take something all the time here, but I wanted to grasp your feelings. I mean, what feelings do you get? You know, what do you think make this movie as fantastic as it is, and why you think, if you think so, that this could be better than Snow White? What is your opinion about that kind of dispute there is Snow White and Pinocchio? Anyone can start.
I think they're toe to toe for me. I think they both have their strengths, and they both have their own little flaws too. There's you can find in Pinocchio, there's continuity errors that are not in Snow White.
Right.
With Geppetto's sequence, the nightcap is on in one shot, the next time it's off and it's back on again. There's little flaws here and there. I mean, but it's still perfect. Both are glorious, and I just think Pinocchio is finer. It's more. It just ups the level in terms, like as Steve mentioned, you can see every dollar, and Bob too. You can see every dollar on the screen. Every dollar spent. It's just they went for it like no other film since. But I think they both have the similar impact. I think maybe Snow White maybe the story is a little simpler and a little more charming, I would say maybe. But Pinocchio, I love the dark Disney stuff too. I like that. I find that fascinating. And I think that's what gives. I like things that kind of separate the Walt Disney perception. It's all pixie dust and fairy and princesses and happy princes and stuff. And Pinocchio is it's not an easy film. It's not a simple film. It's actually, in some way, it's a little challenging. Some audiences have a tough time with it. But I think it's rewarding. And because it's challenging, I appreciate it very much.
Yeah.
From my viewpoint, and don't forget, I'm an animation art collector. So visually, as well as technically, Pinocchio gets the nod for me, because clearly the background work in Pinocchio, inspired by Tenggren and Herder, and then executed by Claude Coates and others, is much more sophisticated than Snow White. So that would be my vote on that issue alone.
Yeah, that's true. Sorry, does anyone else wants to add something? Yeah, there's so many things to say. I know, you know, we could be here forever.
Yeah, my problem is my connection. So I don't know if I'm able. Okay, so for me is Snow White. Sorry, because of being the beginning, all the challenges that they went through and how they established certain things that they carried through for Pinocchio. And regarding the story, I find that I'm not sure if Pinocchio would have been able to be done this day and age, because of the story, because of the themes, mature themes, and all the smoking, drinking, and all the things involved in the movie. Like I'm the cuckoo clocks. Like there's a lot of mature themes there, and I don't think that we could have that made this movie today for children.
You just
And
destroyed
I'm
my
sure
dream.
to them. I'm like, ooh. But it's no way that it has its things, right? Like there's no way cleaning and doing all that stuff. But I find that Pinocchio is scary, and for those reasons, I'll stick to Snow White.
All right. Bob or Nunziante, what would you like to say?
My heart is always with Snow White for personal reasons, but as an animation nerd, I think Pinocchio is wonderful. For personally, I prefer much more to see again and again Snow White or Cinderella or Sleeping Beauty, because they are much more sweet, but it's a problem of the story. The story, like Carmen says, is of Pinocchio is much darker, and so it's a problem of mood. It also comes from Collodi. Much of the atmosphere of Collodi is taken from the book and brought in the movie directly, and so, but if I start seeing Pinocchio, if I decide to start to see it again, I think it's a masterpiece. Now, watch this. We talk about movies,
Wow.
and that's a rare memorabilia. That's a Super 8 copy printed by Darren in the UK in the 90s.
Wow.
It's a rare collector's item.
Very nice.
Very nice.
Because
Yeah.
Disney made these versions in Super 8. They gave Darren films the negatives, and so it's the only, I think, complete on Super 8 original copy. There are copies in 16 millimeters that are circulating in USA, I think also in Technicolor, but in Super 8, it's the only one.
It's complicated.
Can I make a confession? I've seen Pinocchio so many times, but I've never seen it on a big screen.
Wow. No
I
way.
would love to see it. It doesn't screen that often, or I didn't see it as a kid in the theaters. But I almost had a chance to see it, but something happened. I was supposed to see it in Manhattan, and then
Gustavo, may I invite you to my hometown, Peoria, Illinois, where we'll be showing Pinocchio on the big screen, the biggest screen in the state of Illinois, on April the 9th, I believe.
oh wow.
Wow.
You come and see me. First round is on me.
All right. I saw it many two issues in Italy on the big screen, and there's one funny thing I remember. The first time I saw it, it was in the summer of 1977, and you don't believe me, they cut When You Wish Upon a Star in the main title, titles, because we have the dubbed version, and when the film opened in 1947, they took one singer to sing the song When You Wish Upon a Star, but the choral section was left in English. So when they made a reissue in the 1973, they redubbed only the song with another singer. By the way, the singer this time was, if you remember, Romeo and Juliet by Franco Zeffirelli, was Bruno Filippini, that sang also in English, the love team of Nino Rota.
Mhm.
That's
And
awesome.
when the film was reissued again in 1977, they cut almost all the titles. There was only the final section of the song when Jiminy Cricket is singing to the public. I asked why to myself. Then I understood. They made a mistake in printing the copies. The part with the titles, they had printed with the old singer. And Jiminy Cricket with the new singer they redubbed in the 60s. So they found it when all the copies was stuck in Technicolor. And so they said, what do we do now? We can't reprint the first reel, too much cost. So cut the titles.
Oh my God.
And
Oh my God.
they cut everything. And the next reissue, about 7 years after, they had a new copy, totally new copy of the movie with the original titles and the complete song now. That's a funny thing, to go to see Pinocchio in the movies and miss the Oscar winning song.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. You Italians are driving us crazy. That's fantastic.
But they had this way they run for cover, they run for cover in the quick way, run for cover in the quick way, cut.
Oh my God. So I'm gonna do something. Gustavo, can you take the stick and be the leader for a second? I'm gonna bring something that I forgot and I want to show all of you, and I know you're gonna be drooling, so get ready for it. So Gustavo, I'll leave you the stick to follow up with the conversation. Is that okay for you?
Sure.
Okay.
So, well, Nicole, I was just thinking of something a friend of, I know Steve, you're also friendly with him online, like me, Mel Burkrant. He made a very interesting observation of Pinocchio that I never considered. He says, and he's a huge fan of the film. He's a great Disney collector and enthusiast, the best one on the East Coast of the United States. And he said Pinocchio for him is a great film, but he finds the ending tragic. As tragic as the death of Bambi. He says when Pinocchio turns into a real boy, he finds it very sad. And he says, if you don't believe me, think about, again, when there were toys made for children? When did they ever sell dolls of Pinocchio, the real boy? It's the puppet that has all the magic and the delight. And it's very sad for him. He gets emotional when he's no longer a puppet at the end. He's no longer this unique character.
But it was Geppetto's wish, and that overrides, doesn't it?
There you go.
Yeah.
And whatever happens to Jiminy Cricket after that film, what life does he lead? I always wondered that.
He goes to Fun and Fancy Free in the Mickey Mouse Club.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah. You answer my question.
Teaches you how to brush your teeth.
Pinocchio's his calling card. He's a star after that.
Yeah, that's
Very
great.
good.
So I'm gonna show you what I want to show you, and please don't drool too much, because the guys have to really watch this podcast. Okay, so what you see here is apparently, let me see, is just a picture of Pinocchio, right? Okay, so if I open here, this is a piece of the distribution copy. I don't know if you see there.
Yeah, 35
yeah. So this is the image that I have here, the copy on 35. So this image corresponds to what is happening here.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I
can't see which scene is that from.
It's when he's being painted. Sorry, I have the sun here. You see here the brush and Geppetto's hand, and
Yes.
cat, and here you have the hand with the brush, and he's painting the smile of Pinocchio.
Oh.
One of the scenes. And also I just was lucky enough to acquire these two. This is from
Snow White.
Snow White. Yes, it is scene of Snow White. And also I got this one, when the witch, dies. And
Oh, wow. I like
yeah,
that.
but what I have here, I decided to acquire actually the part with the special effect, not the witch itself.
I see.
So is the special effects, right? So anyway, so I was just teasing all of you guys.
I've been
Oh, okay,
pinning it up
hold on,
here.
because here comes Gustavo with something.
This is my favorite I think my favorite Pinocchio collectible out of my collection. And I'm sure some of you have seen this already. This is the lunch tin from 1940.
Wow.
That's all.
Wow.
Yeah, it's rare to have the villains on it too. They don't the scary villains.
Yeah.
Figaro and yours.
That's what you
Yeah. Wow. Honest John, Gideon, Pinocchio, Jiminy, all of them are there. Wow, that's amazing. Oh, and Pinocchio on the top, of course. I have to say that one of the dearest pieces that I have in my collection is Geppetto that I got actually from Gustavo. And how much I love that character of Geppetto. It's just fantastic. So believe it or not, we have been talking for 1 hour and 15 minutes. You guys like to talk too much. Not especially me, I know.
Rachel, can I show something?
Please go ahead.
This is
Wow.
an original print. I don't know. I bought it on eBay, so I don't know. It's a cardboard, printed on cardboard.
Yeah.
I think it's a publicity painting.
Publicity. Yeah. For the cinemas thing. Wow.
And that's the original songbook from Italian.
Oh, nice.
I have that book in Spanish. The same book, I have it in Spanish.
This is in 1940 when the film was. They think the film would be shown in 1940, but so they began to print things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have the hard
one.
You do?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
First edition. They made also a booklet with the story and
Beautiful. I love it.
and all the
Oh, wow.
all the signs of the animators.
Wow, look at that.
Signatures. Wow.
So also 1940, this one. And these are the music sheets I thought.
Oh, yeah.
There are separated for the music sheet single, not the album. And this is Il Paese dei Balocchi, 3 Cheers for Anything, the song. One of the unused song, translated in Italian.
Wow.
This is Turn on the Old Music Box.
Wow.
Mi piace la pianola. That's the second Italian lyrics, because we had one version of Italian lyrics for the first music sheet in 1940. Then the version written for the movie. And then in 1963, the version written for these other sheets.
Honest John, yeah.
Honest John, Jiminy Cricket is name, I'm a happy-go-lucky fellow.
That's great.
And this one, Monster the Whale. I don't know what
That's a rare one.
is.
If you get that in English, it's also very, very sought after.
And these are the one used in the movies. Give a little whistle.
Yes.
Una fischiatina. When you wish upon a star, una stella cade.
Wow.
I did. And I've got no strings, mai mi legherai.
Oh my God, you have an amazing collection there. Each time, we have a podcast.
This one goes out to Bob. This is a British postcard from the year the film came out, but Valentine's.
Aspetta, vi faccio vedere. Cos'è questo? Che bella! Bella!
I wish I knew I had to bring my collection.
Yeah.
The book is from
Show and tell, my.
The book is from Mondadori.
Oh my God, that is so beautiful. You know what, Bob? You are not the only one. I have that in Spanish, yeah. Oh my God, look at this. Oh my God, this is just crazy.
Bigger than my half my body. So.
Yeah. You know what happened, Bob, to me too. I always prepare the podcast and so on, and I'm the second floor of my house, and now in my office, and now I have the collection, of course, in my living room, so everyone can appreciate it. And I always forget to bring it upstairs, but for next time I will. That's most certainly I will do that. So, anyone else would like to add some stuff, something before we say our farewells and all that? Anyone wants to say something about Pinocchio?
Well, I'd just like to say that I'm with at least two of you thinking that Snow White is actually better. I think the main reason is because it was the first research piece that I ever did, so I had to find out a lot more about it. But I find now when I watch Pinocchio, because it's so technologically pure, that all I see are the little mistakes in it. Things like when the coachman takes the boys, you get the long shot of the coach and then another long shot of the boat. And the boys on it are just little shapeless faces, like the very earliest Silly Symphony faces. And I find that it
Jarring.
I suddenly, it jarred. I just fell out of the story for a moment and back in again. Snow White is so innocent and much easier, obviously.
It's also very dark too. Snow White is very dark, very scary. I think it's scarier than Pinocchio.
Yeah, in fact, there was one scene that was cut when it was first released over here. In the UK, it got what was called an A certificate for adult had to be present. And that was because of the piece where the witch kicks the water jug away from the outside and the spider comes out. Yeah, our censors didn't like that.
Very
Hardcore villain right there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
It's a very, very terrifying very terrifying scene. And you know, sometimes many people are convinced that skeleton is the huntsman, but it's not true.
It's an interesting interpretation. You can even argue
but it's not possible because all the movie takes time. It flows in 3 days.
I had a separate interpretation in the end of Snow White. It's a little crazy. I don't think it's just you can read it many different ways. But at the end is all a dream. It doesn't really happen. That's the prince who's the skeleton in the prison. Because they originally during the making of the film, the development, it was the prince that was in prison.
That's true.
Yes.
Dungeon.
I thought, how interesting would it be for the idea that you could read into it at the end is that's the prince in the dungeon that died. He's a skeleton, and it's all a dream. Snow White died, but it's this magic dream. It's all just a dream at the end of the prince coming and bringing her back to life.
The prince is in the dungeon in the comic book version, the classic comic book.
Yeah, in Colladi's story, that's true. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. You see, we cannot talk about one single movie of Disney. We go from one movie to the other and all that kind of stuff. So, guys, thank you so very much for being with us today. We really appreciate your help and your knowledge. And don't forget that for the next time, we need to see your collections. Well, you know, Gustavo. Oh, there you go, Gustavo. Oh my God, I'm gonna. Okay, I'm gonna
cut the film before I start more.
So next month we're going to be talking about Fantasia, so get those old records ready and listen. Oh my God. Very funny, thank you, Gustavo. So next time we are going to be talking about Fantasia. So let's take a look to that movie. Let's analyze it as the way we do, and please bring some of your collectibles if you have, and make us, you know, all be really jealous of you if you if you want. All right. So thank you guys. Thank you for always being there with us.
Thank you.
Thank you to the audience, and hope to see you very soon. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Raquel.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.